GoogleAdsStrategy.com.
Hello and welcome to the Google Ads Strategy Show, where I answer your questions about Google Ads. My name is Kyle Sullerud, and if you have a question you'd like me to answer, go to GoogleAdsStrategy.com and you can ask it there. If you're brand new to Google Ads, I'd recommend going back to episode 1, where I answer the most basic question, what is Google Ads? And then I start to build from there, and it'll give you a great foundation. Today's question comes from Patrick, and he asks, for a new campaign, do you have a standard starting point in terms of a number of ad groups or keywords? How about keyword types and other items like device preference or location limits? Mainly interested in the planning and starting process. So this is a great question, and let me first say that the answer to this is fairly complex. Okay, I cannot tell you everything I know to answer this question in one podcast episode. In fact, in my Elite Local Ads training program, I have about 5 hours of recorded content, slides, and screen shares where I actually talk about just the setup process. Just how to plan and set up a campaign is about 5 hours worth of course material. So it obviously can get very complex, but let me try to answer this as best I can here today. So, do I have a standard starting point in terms of a number of ad groups or keywords? So, here's basically what I do when I'm looking at planning a campaign. There's not a set number of ad groups or keywords that I'm going to tell you to use. This should be dictated based on what it is you're selling. What is the product or service you're selling? Or are there multiple products and services you're selling? Basically, what you need to do is start researching keywords. And you use Google's Keyword Planner for this. And what you want to do is just find all the things that people are searching for that would lead them to your product or service. So, for example, if you are running a junk removal company, which I did at one point in my life, the keywords people are typing in that you might want your ad to show up for are not many. There are not a lot. Things like junk removal, junk hauling, maybe things like furniture removal or electronics recycling. There are not a lot, but once you go to the Google Keyword Planner and start typing some things in, Google's going to feed you more and more ideas. And you keep looking at what makes sense, and you're going to develop a list of keywords. Okay, now as you're developing this list of keywords, you want to keep it organized by ad group. So what's the point of an ad group? It's basically to have an ad or a set of ads that are going to show up for a set of keywords. So the reason you would need a separate ad group is if you needed a separate ad. So maybe your ad for junk removal looks different than your ad for electronics recycling. So that would warrant separate ad groups for those. But it's very possible you'd want to put junk removal and junk hauling in the same ad group. There's not a really good reason to have a different ad for that. Or maybe if you have a lot of keywords like TV recycling or computer recycling, computer disposal, those probably don't need all different ads. You could put those in an ad group for electronics recycling. So really, the number of ad groups is determined by how many different ads do you need? How many different ways do you need to put your business in front of people depending on what they're searching for? And then the number of keywords is just determined by the different ways that people are searching for your product or service. There are things you can do to modify those keywords. For example, adding location names to the keywords. So you might have junk removal in Chicago and junk removal near me and things like that. Those could all be added as separate keywords also. And in fact, that's what I do, is I add all those different variations of the keywords, because that's going to give me more control over the campaign. If you were to just add one broad match keyword like junk removal, you're still going to get probably all those same searches. Your ad's going to show up for them all, but it just doesn't give you control. You're only able to bid on one keyword versus bidding on dozens or hundreds of keywords by adding all those specific keywords. And by the way, my software, Keyword Burst, can do that for you. You just put in the list of locations and you put in your keywords, and then it'll combine all of that for you. And you can find that at software.adlag.com. But moving on to the other questions that were part of Patrick's question here. So he's also asking, how about keyword types and other items like device preference or location limits? So as far as keyword types go, I stick to exact match. You definitely want to have those. Those give you the best control possible over when your ads are showing up. And I also use phrase match and modified broad match. It's very rare that I'll use just straight broad match, because Google's going to put too much garbage into my campaign if I'm just using broad match. But we use exact match for the best control, and then phrase match and modified broad match, just because people are always searching for things in different ways. There may not be enough monthly searches for something to use exact match targeting, so you have to use phrase match and or modified broad match just to make sure you're getting in front of the all the possible queries. Okay, and then as far as device preference and location limits, that's really going to be dictated again by the campaign. For device preference, usually there's not a good reason to start out bidding differently for computers versus mobile versus tablet. Unless you have some kind of product or service that's specifically relevant to mobile phones or something, there's not a good reason to start out with different bids for different devices. Eventually, the data might tell you to bid differently for different devices. If you found that your particular customers are more likely to make a purchase when they're on a computer, well, then you might need to adjust your device bids accordingly. But starting out, it's very hard to know that. So I always start campaigns with no bid modifiers on devices, and then I watch and possibly make adjustments based on performance. Location limits, again, this needs to be dictated by your product or service. If you're only serving a certain area, a certain location, then that needs to be your location limit. Maybe there's more to what you were thinking behind that, but it really, wherever you're trying to sell to, if that's the whole country, if that's just a zip code, then that would be your location targeting. Just make sure you're not using the default setting, which is going to include people interested in that location. You want to make sure to change that so it's only people who are in or who are regularly in the location that you're targeting. So Patrick, thanks for the question. I hope that this was of use to you. I think the biggest thing you can do is just start writing things down. Maybe not with a pencil and paper, but open up a document, start putting all of your ideas into it. Start listing your keywords, thinking about how those are going to be organized into ad groups and what the ads should say for those ad groups. So then once you go to set up your campaign, you have everything in front of you and you can just start plugging the information in. So that's it for today's episode of the Google Ads Strategy Show. I'm your host, Kyle Sullerud, and I will talk to you later.